Good morning. I should say good morning and then turn and say good morning. We have kind of like two congregations today. Okay, first and foremost, before we get started, I have to say happy birthday, Mom. It's my mom's birthday. Do y'all want to say happy birthday to my mom? Sorry about not sending the card, but we all sang happy birthday. So I love you, Mom. And welcome to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Reverend Deborah Bennett, and as always, it's a delight to be with you, and it's a delight to be a Unitarian Universalist. We are a faith that promotes and affirms the inherent worth and dignity of all. We see light inside the darkness, and today's service is all about remembering the light. And there is so much joy for us to celebrate today. Our monthly theme is joy, and I am totally in joyful mode that we have, for the first time back since the pandemic hit us, the choir, led by our beautiful Kathy Middleman. So they'll be doing an anthem today that is not to be missed. Our theme this month is joy, and I love what Brene Brown, who's that social scientist most notable for her work around vulnerability, I love what she says about joy. So I'm going to begin with this. She says, "Twinkle lights are the perfect metaphor for joy. Joy is not a constant. It comes to us in moments, often ordinary moments. Sometimes we miss out on the bursts of joy because we're too busy chasing down extraordinary moments. Other times we're so afraid of the dark that we don't dare let ourselves enjoy the light." Now, our worship this morning may be one of those simple, ordinary moments in your life, but I do hope that it is one in which you do not miss the joy. So please, now let us sing together and bring in the joy. Our opening hymn is in the gray hymnal. I also see that Maggie was so kind and printed it, so you could also just turn to your order of service. It is 368. Now let us sing. Please rise.
Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the faith within. Lift up your voice. Be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the faith within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the hope within. Lift up your voice. Be not afraid. Sing to the power of the hope within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the love within. Lift up your voice. Be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the love within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the joy within. Now let us sing. Sing to the power of the joy within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Now let us sing to the power of the joy within.
Good morning, and welcome to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Sarah Drew, and I'm an intern at Emerson this school year, and I am your worship assistant today. Each Sunday, we light a candle of acknowledgement and remembrance for the Cherokee and Muskogee nations of people who lived on this land before us. May this candle humbly remind us of our interconnection and the impact of our collective actions. May there be healing in all nations of people. Each Sunday, we also light our chalice. Its light is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism and a reminder of our commitment to be a beacon of love and hope to all who enter, whether in person or virtually. Today's chalice lighting words are from Gordon B. McKeeman. Deep calls unto deep. Joy calls unto joy. Light calls unto light. Let the kindling of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of love, of peace, of hope. And as one flame lights another, nor grows the less, we pledge ourselves to be the bearers of light wherever we are. Now, in the spirit of beloved community and connection, let's greet and welcome each other to worship as we share our congregational affirmation. We need not think alike to love alike. I invite you to move around and introduce yourself to someone who you don't know. Online folks, please use the chat to introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. What are you looking for? Oh, we'll keep an eye out for her.
Here at Emerson, our vision is to be a radically inclusive, open-minded, beloved community that is a vibrant source of peace, hope, and healing in the world. We know we cannot live this vision alone, and so each month we partner with another organization and encourage our members and friends to support their work both financially and with action. Today's Share the Basket is for El Refugio. El Refugio was established to support family and friends of immigrants and asylum seekers detained at Stewart Detention Center, located in the remote southern Georgia town of Lumpkin. In 2010, El Refugio opened a hospitality house offering meals and lodging at no cost. Perhaps more importantly, they offer friendship and support to the loved ones of immigrants and asylum seekers who are detained. Our financial support makes a difference, and this month we also encourage you to support those leaving the detention center by providing them with much-needed clothing. Those who request it receive a backpack with essential items when they are released, whether it is to remain here in the States or sadly to be deported. Beside our holiday tree, there's information about how to contribute items to these backpacks. During the offertory music, please feel free to come forward and take a cutout backpack, which will list needed items. So each individual backpack has an individual item on it. This one says pants size medium, and if it's for a woman or a man, they all have an individual item. So you could take more than one, but in order to sort of spread the responsibility of filling these backpacks among a bunch of us, there's just one item on each backpack. So if you take that one, you can go to the website on the backpack and sign up to return that item back to Emerson, and then we can build these complete backpacks for El Refugio. We would like to have all these requests filled by the end of the month. This is one small but important way we can support individuals in their time of need. As our donation baskets go around, please feel free to offer a donation by cash or check or take a card which describes the ways to give and enjoy a lollipop just for the fun of it. All donations, unless otherwise specified, are shared equally with Emerson and our partner organization.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Susan Ullman. I serve as a member of our Emerson Pastoral Care team. We're available with listening ears and very caring hearts to support you during challenging times. Each Sunday, we pause to share personal joys, sorrows, and concerns of our Emerson community. If you want to contact the pastoral care team or share a joy, sorrow, or concern at a Sunday service, please email them to pastoralcare@emersonuu.org. When you are with us here in the building, we also invite you to write your joy, sorrow, or concern before the service in this yellow book, which will be on the stand back there near the main doors. Reverend Deborah will light the candles today. We light our vigil bowl also. Its light represents the light of hope for the peaceful resolution of all conflicts on our planet. I share a joy with you today. It's from Susan Ullman, that's me. Santa came early to our Emerson congregation and brought our building a bath. Our building has had a bath. Now, it wasn't a total gift. We had to pay some spraying and handling charges to the person who gave it a bath, but that's what we got early for Christmas, so it's a joy. And I share an item from Melanie LeMay. It's a joy mixed with concern. Melanie is at home with George, recovering from a second surgery on her elbow, the one she broke last summer. Her doctor is an elbow specialist, and he says that with extensive physical therapy, she will, quote, be very pleased with the results, unquote. She hopes he's right, and she asks for your healing thoughts at this time. We don't have any sorrows or other sorrows or concerns submitted. But we also know there may be joys, sorrows, and concerns not spoken. Please feel free to say out loud or type into the chat if you're at home watching us now the name of someone you are holding in your heart today. Judy.
Ronnie.
Let us send our heartfelt caring intentions to all those whose names have been spoken and to all beings everywhere by offering the Buddhist prayer of loving kindness. Please repeat the words after me. May all beings be filled with loving kindness.
May all beings be filled with loving kindness.
May they be free from harm and suffering.
May they be free from harm and suffering.
May they be well in body, heart, and mind.
May they be well in body, heart, and mind.
May they be at peace.
May they be at peace.
Blessed be.
Okay, kids, young and at heart, if you'd like to join us, I seem to have a Christmas tree. I am just a prop for this story, but I will sit here and be a good prop if you'll join me. Anna could join me for being a prop. Okay. I'm going to be Jeffrey's microphone prop.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm Jeffrey Jacoby, and I have a story for all ages. Today's story is called The Solstice Badger by Robin McFadden. If you've never seen a badger before, this is what he looks like.
Ooh, he's kind of cute.
Kind of cute. So back in the beginning of time, it was always summer. The world was filled with the very first creatures, and they loved the everlasting summer sunshine. The sun walked without hurry and joy across the sky every day, until there came a day when the sun's head grew a little heavy. His light was weaker, and all the first creatures wondered and worried. Apparently, the sun was lonely and he needed a friend. All the first creatures tried to befriend the sun, but once they all got close to him, they got burned. This made the sun even sadder, so he got even more sad. But far down under the earth, there's a river, and it runs from horizon to horizon. And both the sun and the moon rest in its waters whenever they aren't up in the sky. Near this underground river, way below the earth's surface, there lived the very first badger. His tunnels went everywhere, and he loved the bright jewels he found in the darkness. His home was a giant geode with walls that glittered and sparkled. In his solitude, he was pretty content, but he was a little lonely too. One night, Badger heard crying, and he followed the sound down his tunnels to the bank of that underground river. There was the sun. "What's wrong?" Badger asked gently. The sun was startled and jumped to his feet. "A new creature! I've never seen anything like you before. But you should run away before I burn you." Badger shook his head and said, "I have collected gems in the white-hot center of the world. You're not going to burn me. Come to my house and have tea." So they talked, and they found they had a lot to say to each other, each having been living in solitude. That next day when the sun rose, his light was clear and bright, and all the creatures of the earth knew that the sun had found a friend, and they were all very happy for him.
Yay.
That night, That night, the sun hurried back to the badger's house so they could continue their talks and their stories. They enjoyed talking so much that the sun left later each time they got together. Things went on like this for a while, and the sun was starting later every day and setting earlier and earlier so he could return to his good friend, and he didn't notice the world was changing. Leaves were falling, the winds were getting bitter, and the very first snow began to fall. The trees were fine, but the creatures of the world were miserable in the cold. One evening, when Sun arrived at Badger's house, his friend said, "Come with me, Sun." And they went to the shallow tunnels near the earth's surface, and he said, "Listen." The Sun listened, and he heard the howling wind and these creaking branches and the sounds of shivering and sneezing and no bird song and no scampering feet. "You must have spent too much time with me, Sun. The world misses you." The Sun was filled with remorse for what he had done for neglecting his duties to the world, and he would have rushed up to the sky and stayed there to make up all the lost time. But his prudent badger friend stopped him. "Hasty repairs make weak burrows," the badger said. "We must act wisely to fix this." So the Sun thought and said, "The trees are the oldest things on earth, and Pine is the eldest. I think she'll know what to do, but she may be angry with me." So Badger packed a sack with all of his most precious, glorious gems he'd collected and enough food for a feast. "Wait for me here," he told the Sun, and for the first time ever, torch in paw, he tunneled all the way to the surface of the earth. Pine stood in a glade in the forest, and Badger broke through that surface and stood before her, and she greeted him calmly. "Hello, small animal who befriends the sun." Her deep voice made the ground quiver. "Welcome." Oh, I guess I made that quiver. He bowed to her and said, "My friend Sun wishes to fix the harm he's caused. If he went back to his old ways," yeah, it was like that, would the world be healed?" "If he brought back the warmth tomorrow," Pine said, "the world would drown in snow melt and all the world would be chaos." Badger replied, "Well, wise one, I have gifts for you. Will you accept them with our apologies and tell me what advice to give my only friend?" He showed her the jewels and the food, and she looked thoughtful. "A generous gift," she said, "and one I have no use for. Give them to the creatures who have suffered more than I. As for a solution, the Sun must regain his old habits as gradually as he lost them. All good things in this world happen slowly, seeds and eggs and seasons alike. You will miss him," she said, "but to make things right, he must go back, and it must be this way." He nodded, and tears filled his eyes. "But don't despair, brave Badger," Pine said, in a voice so resonant it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "My roots are on great Mother Earth's pulse, and she speaks now through me. When 7 cycles of the moon have passed, the days will be as long as ever, but then your visits can grow again. After 13 moons, the pattern will begin anew, for the Sun must have a companion, and the Badger must be rewarded for his selflessness." And the Great Mother has decided to welcome these dark times and call them winter. All of the things held their breath in a moment of great awe. Badger joyfully cried, "So let it be. On this night every year I will tunnel to the surface to give gifts to all small beasts, gifts of thanks, blessing, and love." He held his torch high up in the air and said, "This will be a token of the sun's return. Please, Pine, take it and call them." Pine bent down and took the torch. When she straightened back up, it glowed like a big star in her topmost branches. Far and near, creatures saw the light and went toward it. They saw in the tree, then, all of the beautiful gems Badger had collected and had lovingly placed in her branches. They shimmered and sent colorful light out into the cold winter darkness. And then on the ground, but around the tree, was spread a huge banquet, enough for all those poor little creatures that had been suffering. Badger returned to the sun to tell him the good news. And the next morning, the day began a little earlier. And every day since then, the sun travels across the sky watching everything that we do. So he has stories to tell Badger. And their visits grow longer every night for half a year. At the darkest part of winter, we still honor wise old Pine by hanging jewels and lights in her branches. And on the longest night, Badger still tunnels to the surface, bearing gifts to all small creatures who patiently bear the cold and darkness, knowing that even winter will forever be joyful as long as the Solstice Badger keeps his promise, and he always will.
Yay.
All right, shall we sing our song of dedication?
Put the tree in the middle. Thank you, Jeffrey. That was a great story. I want to leave our tree lit up. Whoa. Oh, see? You told me that it would happen. Just look the other way. Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, thank you for getting us started in our solstice celebration. Welcome to the solstice. We have some more candles to light, so I'm going to invite Sarah to join us. It is the season of light, so let us bring some more light into our days. We're going to start first with our Advent candles. The Advent derives from that Latin word adventus, meaning arrival. And Advent symbolizes the season of expectant waiting and the arrival of the nativity of Jesus. And today is the fourth Sunday of Advent, and we once again light our Advent wreath. Although, Sarah, we don't actually light that middle candle. Could you blow that one out? Yeah, that's for Christmas Eve. So in Advent, an Advent wreath, you normally have 4 candles, and you light one each Sunday prior to Christmas. So the first one is lit for love, and the second for hope, and the third for peace. And then on the 4th Sunday, which is today, we light it for joy, which is appropriate to our theme. On Christmas Eve, we'll light the center candle. But today we also get to relight our Yule log in honor of the pagan sacred day of the winter solstice called the Yule. So this year, the winter solstice arrives on Tuesday, the shortest day of light of the year and the longest night. And as Sarah lights our Yule log, which this beautiful Yule log was created 2 years ago by Lane LaFay. Thank you, Lane. Calls out to Lane. Sarah's going to bring the light to us. And I'm wondering, as we gaze upon our many lights, if we could just dim the stage lights a little bit as we take in these words about the solstice. The wheel of the year turns. The cold, dark winter has long been a time for reflection on mortality, isolation, and fear. But the wheel of the year has turned once again, and our hearts now cry out for the light, for connection, for community and hope. We cheer on the God of light, the symbol of life itself, and the returning of the sun. As we brave the longest night together, we remember what gives us hope. We dream of the world we want for ourselves and for our children. On this winter solstice, may whatever grows that glimmers in your heart be present. And may you share it without hesitation, just as the light of the Yule spreads its light to all who will glance its way. And so mo it be. feel like I was just bathed in this delicious something. Thank you, choir. It's so good to have you back. We're just giving a few members of the choir time. We're having some, as you might know in this room, it gets a little echoey, and so sometimes it's hard for them to hear the message. And since I warned them that they're now going to be tested on the sermon material, a few of the A students wanted to come down and make sure they caught it all. No judgment of the rest of you. I'm sure you can hear fine. This week, as I sat with that blank paper in front of me ready to write the sermon, I wrote the title on top of my page, Still There Is Light. Now, even as I wrote those words, part of my brain wanted to fight that entire premise. 'Tis the season of light, they say, but also 'tis the season of stress, of trying to affirm my love through gifts, of having to face relations whose opinions and values may seem counter to our own. And for far too long, it's been the season of listening to the news of a world marred in catastrophe, tension, and hate. So the words sat on the page alone for a long while as I pondered my resistance to their truth. Still there is light. Now, perhaps my resistance was fed by my sore arm that I was nursing after a third vaccine in the continuing fight against a global pandemic. Those words roll off the tongue too easily now, don't they? Global pandemic. Still there is light. I added a question mark to the end of the phrase and was reminded, too, of the first aphorism of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Now, these Yoga Sutras were written about 1,600 years ago. They were compiled by a man named Patanjali. The material itself is much like the Taoist Tao Te Ching in that it's not the work of one author, but is a combination of a canon of much older wisdom. Now, the first lines in this ancient teaching translate simply as, now the practice of yoga. The Sanskrit word for yoga means to yoke or to unite, and it's said to refer to the uniting of our individual or ego consciousness with the universal or collective consciousness. Some of the many commentaries on the Yoga Sutras just brush over this first stanza, claiming it's just an introduction to the real teachings that are to come. However, I have always viewed these first words not so much as a preface as an entrance exam question. And now, the practice of unity? The implication being that after living in the false shadow of separation, resistance, attachment, and ego, the sages would first need to ask the practitioner, are you really finally ready to practice living in union? Are you ready to experience life as interconnected, as unified, as whole, and dare I say, as good? So I wrote that question too. And now, the practice of union, beside my sermon title. Still, there is light. The questions both hung there together, waiting for me to answer and affirm their view of the world, one where unity and light do exist. But then I felt the urge to write a third statement down. So beside them I wrote, affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all. It is the Unitarian Universalist first principle, and it is a commitment to hold each person in the light of wholeness, and at its core is one of the core tenets of our faith. A fundamentalist colleague in our interfaith group once said to me, he said, the difference in our faiths is that you see people as born good and whole, and we view them as broken and in need of salvation. I said yes to his statement, feeling, I admit, a bit proud about our goodness. But silently I wondered, do we? As a Unitarian Universalist minister, perhaps the question I have heard most is some version of, must I really see the inherent worth and dignity in everyone? Everyone? No, really, everyone? We don't really mean everyone, do we? And by extension, I think we also ask, is there really light even in the darkest days of our lives? Even amongst the devastation of climate change, capitalist greed, racism, queer phobia, misogyny, and the list goes on. Within the heap of a mess that life can sometimes be, can we really feel unified with all? So I added a question mark to our first principle and added it to my list. Affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all. Still there is light. Now, the practice of unity. Such simple questions, and yet each made me take a long, honest pause. Were all these phrases and ideas just spiritual gibberish, nice thoughts, good intentions, yet solely and sorely impractical, unrealistic, and truly unattainable? Or maybe, could it be that they were not answers, but more of a roadmap? Something to provide a direction to follow. To live as Unitarian Universalists, we cannot simply espouse spiritual ideals, for ours is a faith of action. We must figure out how to live them. I like to say that Unitarian Universalism is not a faith that will give you the answers, but it is one that will poke you in the side until you are willing to go out and find them for yourselves. Fortunately, we do not have to go far to start finding the light, do we? Have you ever walked into what you thought was a totally dark room, only to notice in a few moments later how your eyes relaxed and adjusted, and there actually was light? I love the story of the simple clay Buddha that was found in 1957. Perhaps you know it. At the time, an entire monastery in Thailand was being relocated by a group of monks. And one day they began to move this giant clay Buddha when one of the monks noticed a little crack in the clay. So they looked closer and they saw that there was some golden light coming through. So the monk got out a hammer and chiseled away at this thick clay exterior to reveal that in fact it was a large Buddha statue made entirely of gold. The statue was thought to have been built around 1400 and was revered by the Buddhists for many hundreds of years. But then in 1757, the Burmese army invaded Thailand. Facing complete annihilation, the Buddhist monks at the monastery must have hastily covered this golden Buddha with plaster and clay. And then they painted it and inlaid it with like little bits of colored glass to make it look of little or no value. During the invasion, all the Buddhist monks were tragically murdered, but this nearly 10-foot tall, 5-ton golden Buddha was left intact and remained undiscovered for 200 years. Perhaps this is what we do too. When we feel threatened, it seems like a sensible thing to cover up our light, to hide that which is the gold inside of us. And don't many of us live in a perpetual state of feeling threatened by the world these days? And the truth is, it can take a long time to peel dry clay from around us to let out that light. And so we can convince ourselves that we are really not light-filled at all. We begin to believe in the clay exterior. Imagine if there was a society of golden Buddhas who were to do this, and they gathered in a room covered in their clay, and they started judging each other's exteriors, pointing out all the dullness of the clay and all the unseemly little cracks and the cheap jewelry. Perhaps to see the light in the dark, we must be willing to expose our light as well. The Buddhist teacher Tara Brach, who was actually raised as a Unitarian Universalist herself, speaks of this inner gold in her new book, Trusting the Gold. And in it, she encourages us to remember the gold in ourselves as a doorway to seeing the light of others. She reminds us that even in the midst of suffering, we can pause and behold the basic goodness that shines through each of us. In her book, she reminds us to be proactive in our search for the light. We need to make the decision to behold it. She offers 3 directives: to trust the moment, to turn toward love in any situation, and to practice non-judgmental awareness. I read this book the other day, and I started to think that perhaps my resistance to this idea of the light was more about my expectation that the light was somehow supposed to just show up and find me, instead of me finding it. But then again, I thought maybe I do that with the dark too. I just assume it is there, forgetting that sometimes it is I who creates the darkness. It is I who turns out the light. I've always thought that idea of being in the closet was such a profound description. Stuffed in a dark place, unable to move or be truly who you are, your light blocked by the door. And then one day you open the door. And I'm sure it's different for everyone, but some of my friends have spoken about how it can take a few minutes for your eyes to get used to the light after you come out of the dark. I don't have a sexual or gender orientation closet to come out of, but I have often felt that I've been in a self-constructed little dark room. Perhaps you have one of those as well. My closet is called self-judgment. It is the dark place I go when I want to hide my light or pretend it was never there. Inside that little closet, I make lots of lists that help me stay inside. Have you ever been in that dark closet yourself? Perhaps yours has a different name. It's hard to see anyone else's light when we keep ourselves in dark closets by whatever their names. Whether it's that protective clay we cover ourselves with or the closets we stuff ourselves into, the end result is the same. We miss out on experiencing our own light. We miss out on sharing that light of others. And perhaps most profoundly, we often miss seeing the beauty of others' light. Have you ever noticed how terrible other people are when you're not feeling good about yourself? They become really easy to judge. Sometimes I like going to shopping centers as a spiritual practice, and no, I'm not talking about retail therapy, but instead the ancient art of people watching. Now maybe nowadays people do this on social media. I still like going to the mall. But wherever you watch others, this practice is to look for their light. When I try, I'm always amazed at how easy it is to judge others before I get to the light part. Have you noticed that? Like even today when you walked in, what were all your first thoughts as you glanced at each other? How many of you said, "Oh, there's light, and there's light. I love your light. I see your light. I see you. I see you. I see you." Of course, to find the light, you must believe that it is there. Unitarian Universalism doesn't pretend to claim that everything that humans do is good or that all parts of us are pure light, because humans, in fact, do some really nasty, hurtful, harmful, bad things. But Unitarian Universalism invites us to affirm that inside each of us is a golden light of goodness, that we are born with that light, and that now is the time for us to practice living in unity. This is why I'm drawn to this faith. It recognizes human goodness, even in the darkness. Affirming and promoting this light in each person is perhaps the greatest act of our faith that we can do. I think it's our communion cup. It's our sacred act. It is our practice, and I think now is a good time to embrace it. I'm going to close this morning with this lovely story from the poet Naomi Shihab Nye, because I think it profoundly illustrates the lesson of light and sharing our light. Naomi writes this. She says, wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, she says, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. Can you imagine that moment? Do you know that moment where you know you're being called to do something and there's that little tiny pause? Am I going to call in sick on this one? She says, I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumbled to the floor, wailing. Help, said the flight agent. Talk with her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this. I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haughtily. Shudo shubikak habita. Goes on. I'm not going to try to translate the Arabic. The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly I spoke them, she stopped crying. She had thought that the flight had been canceled entirely, and she needed to be in El Paso for a major medical treatment the next day. I said to her in Arabic, no, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call them. We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her, and she talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, that they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? And this all took about 2 hours. And she was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. And she had pulled out a sack of homemade momol, which are cookies, little powdered crumb cookies that were mounded, stuffed with dates and nuts that were in her bag. And she began offering them to all the women at the gate. And to my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar, all smiling. There was no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such is the way in the old country. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying and confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies, and I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Isn't that a beautiful story? The earth shows us that even in the longest, darkest night, the sun does return. By our willingness to look for and find the places of unity with others, we too affirm that our light and their light will return again and again. We affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all does exist. And yes, I will say, still there is light. Yes, I'm ready for the practice of unity, although my practice will be imperfect. And yes, I affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all. My friends, may this season of returning to the light enliven your heart. May you look for and find the glowing light of love in your life and in the eyes of everyone you encounter. And may you share the joy of cookies as often as possible. My friends, I'm going to invite us into a time of meditation now. So please find a place that feels comfortable for you to sit. If you'd like to close your eyes, feel free to close your eyes. Take a moment to reflect on that message of the light, your own inner light that, like the golden Buddhas, may be covered by layers and layers and layers of clay. Reflect for a minute on what it will take for a little chisel to come out and touch that clay, for you to begin to excavate your own heart. What will it take for you to see who you really are? Imagining yourself here right now, starting to break through, your own light beginning to shine out in this very room amongst these very people. And then imagine yourself opening your eyes and seeing the light that surrounds you. One little golden Buddha after another lined up to your right and to your left, in front of you and behind you. Just beacons of light. Some still covered in clay, most still covered in some clay. Some perhaps tucked away in a closet in the corner of the room, just beginning to peek out. And what will it take for you to allow your light to acknowledge theirs? And now, are you ready? Now, after so much pain and suffering of separation, are you ready? Can you see the light that has been there all along? Hafiz has said, "We have not come here to take prisoners, but to surrender ever more deeply to freedom and joy. We have not come into this existence to hold ourselves hostage from love. Run, my dear, from anything that may not strengthen your precious budding wings, your beautiful heart. We have not come here to take prisoners or to confine our wondrous spirits, but to experience ever and ever more deeply our divine courage, freedom, and light." Allow yourself to affirm your own light. And then as you are ready, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes, pull out a gray hymnal, and we are together going to change the last hymn to something a little bit more upbeat than what was originally chosen. Let's turn to 118 and sing an oldie but goodie. Dyer has said, see the light in others and treat them as if that is all you see. May we take that to heart this holiday season and beyond. Blessed be everyone.
We hope you have been nourished in heart and mind by our worship today. As our chalice is extinguished this morning, please join me in the final words. They are posted in the chat and in the order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts and out into the world until we are together again.
Please join us for refreshments and fellowship in our fellowship room on the first floor near the back doors. Those of you online, please stay tuned in. You'll be able to go to virtual breakout rooms for fellowship time. At 11:15, our second hour activities for adults, children, and youth begin. Please see the listings in the order of service. Our service is now concluded, but our connection has only begun.
Go now in peace and take peace wherever you go. Hit it, Bruce.